Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tuesday topic. Today's topic is the Dean's R3 updates from recent awardees. Today on our panel for the Dean's R3 updates from recent awardees, we have Dr. Girija Kaimal, who's the Assistant Dean for Special Research Initiatives and the Interim Chair and Associate Professor for the Creative Arts Therapy Department. On the panel, we have Dr. Arun Ramakrishnan, who is the Director of Research Labs. We have Dr. Jessica Chou, who is an assistant professor in counseling and family therapy, Carrie Catone, who is a PhD candidate in creative arts therapies, and finally, Denise Wei, who is an assistant professor for undergraduate nursing. All right, so now that that is out of the way, take it away, Dr. Kaimal.
Thank you, Darren, and welcome everyone. This is a review presentation on the R3 mechanism, which is the Rapid Response Grant. It's an internal grant mechanism established by our Dean, Laura Gitlin, when she came in 2018. So we've had the R3 awards disseminated twice a year since 2018, and last year we began the Doctoral Student Award. This is specifically for PhD students, both at the pre-dissertation and post-dissertation or post-dissertation proposal stage. So today our panel will includes individuals who are recipients of this award, so you can get a sense of their experiences and hot tips from how they've used the funds as well as how they planned for the proposal, all of the above. Okay, so in, let me see, I'm going to show you the two calls that we have active right now. So I'm going to do a share screen. So the Rapid Response Grant, it is offers funding for up to $5,000 to full-time research faculty. So anyone who's interested in applying has to be a full-time faculty member in CNHP. You can have other people on your team who are part-time or postdocs, but the lead applicant has to be a full-time faculty member. It can be someone tenured, tenure track, non-tenure track. It's really open to anyone. So really the aim is to support your research initiatives, which ideally should lead on to a presentation, a publication, or larger grants that you want to go to. So this is a way for you to sort of establish a foundation, get some pilot data, or work with existing data that you need some support with analysis. Right. So I went over the criteria. Pre-doctoral students and postdoctoral fellows are not eligible to apply to this right now. So when you submit, you will submit everything as a single PDF to this email, and you will CC Victoria Schwachter. Vicky's the one who's going to be receiving this, and you will receive a confirmation that your application has been received. It's due February 28th. If you don't receive that confirmation, please email us again. We want to be sure that all your hard work is recorded and in place. How will it be reviewed? So it's going to be reviewed by faculty and postdoctoral fellows. We de-identify all the applications as much as possible. However, your names are there, but we have a specific review form that we use, and we have each application reviewed by 2 reviewers. We aggregate the scores and the comments, and the final decisions are made by the dean and me together. Everything is due by 5 p.m. Please do not be late. And we go through the review process in March. We will try to announce decisions by March 31st so that you can begin your work in the spring quarter. So in general, we are open to a range of studies. So it could be active data collection, it could be qualitative, quantitative mixed methods designs, it could be systematic reviews or historical research studies. We are really open to any kind of research as long as it's a research study. So this is not a grant for any teaching innovation. That's a different mechanism. You might have seen that email, the healthcare innovation grant mechanism. That's more for pedagogy, teaching. This is explicitly for research, okay? It should be something that is a demonstrated clinical need. We are a university and a college that's deeply invested in clinical practice, so we want applications that address a clinical need. It should be feasible, so plan for it to be finished within a year. And you cannot use the budget for like salary or anything like that, or for travel to conferences, but you can use it for a research assistant, equipment, supplies, any of the above. All right, these are all the pieces of the proposal. The title page, abstract, objective, significance, methods, roles. Make sure you follow the budget guidelines and allowable and not allowable expenses. And that's pretty much it. So, your main proposal should not exceed 3 pages. So keep that in mind as you are planning. The second award mechanism that we have is the PhD Student Award. This offers funding up to $2,000 for students who are past the dissertation proposal stage and $1,000 for students who are in the pre-dissertation stage. So you might have a practicum project or a smaller study that's part of your doctoral work. You can apply for funding. Now, similar to the R3 here as well, you can't use the funding for travel or anything like that, but you can use it for research assistants, any consultants. Travel is only to collect data. So say you need to go to a particular site, local travel, you can use it for that. But really the funding is to support your research activities in ways that you can't really get funding elsewhere. This too needs to be completed within a year. Here again, the submissions are to a different email, but you will still be CC Victoria. So she is your contact person for all the submissions. The doctoral student awards are also reviewed by 2 members of the faculty or the postdoctoral team. And again, we will aim to let you know by March 31st again. The doctoral student award is a smaller proposal, only 2 pages. However, you have to make sure your supervisor's on board with it and has to be a co-investigator. So you really cannot submit it without your advisor or supervisor's support, and we explicitly need that signature on top. Okay, so I will stop there. Any questions about either of these announcements? All right, so if there are no questions, I will stop share and have our panel share their updates and insights. So next up is Dr. Arun Ramakrishnan.
Thanks so much for the introduction. The rapid response grants from Dean Gitlin, this has been very helpful for some of my projects. As you know, I'm a research lab director. I primarily work with devices and equipments, but at the same time, I also help answer some science-related questions. Because of my background as a neuroscience and a biomedical engineer, I tend to work more with equipment-related projects. And so my grants, the grants that I work with, also kind of shadow that idea of developing an app, developing a new technique or technology, or even a therapeutic mechanism. So these are some of the past rapid response grants. These are not all R3 grants, but as you can see, but they are rapid response grants, which means that they have this extremely short timeline, very similar restrictions as to where we can use the funds and where it can be really an asset added to future grants. So I started this in 2018 with Abby Dougherty there's multiple people in that project. I just put the PI's name in there on the use of mindfulness in VR. It's a $5,000 grant, but one benefit from that is we got devices that we still use currently for our VR classes. So that's a huge asset, and everybody worked for in-kind. There are some learning points from that grant that I'll address in a second. And then we got the 2020 Racial Justice Rapid Response Grant from the university with Ebony White as the PI. Again, there is some, based on COVID and things that happen, I can say some important points that will not fit in a 1 year timeline. So you can try to avoid that. And then the two projects that I'm currently working with is the one with Minjung as a PI and the other one as Kathy Quay. So I'm going to drop in the takeaways right now because I think these are important for future applicants of the grant because the pandemic's still not over. So it's a great way to jumpstart a project idea. It's wonderful to and also due to the short timeline, the grant is great for pilot studies. So clinical trials or like randomized control trials may not be the best outlet for this kind of project. So a subject number of 5, 10, that's pretty reasonable. And projects involving a specific classroom that is congregating at a certain time within the project timeline would be very helpful in like just keeping track of things and making sure the deliverables are done within that timeline. And also, like I mentioned, it's great for buying equipment and getting the lab started because equipment in my line of research, the latest equipment and the best scientific equipment makes a big difference in the research outcomes. One thing also to take into consideration is IRB approval, which takes 2 to 4 weeks, sometimes a lot more. So always plan that when you're doing these grants, if it requires IRB approval, it's better to start that from day one. Put that in phase 1, not just before the clinical trials. Co-ops and STAR students we found very helpful in the past for research support. They have very competitive selection process, and in co-op there is cycle A, B, and C. So you'd want to get the first of the batches to get interested in your project. So post your job postings as soon as possible. The co-op cycles are clearly put in the, and they also like kind of coincide with the grant timeline. So make sure you look at co-ops and star students. They'll be a great asset for your program. And also another thing is to remember that you can also hire co-ops part-time. It's not always the full salary because it can be supported by the small grant. So look for part-time co-ops as well. There'll be a lot of people interested in getting the research experience. So things that I had issues with the COVID is participating sites off-campus sites had to close. And some of the filming projects that we undertook for these R3 grants, we had to put on hold because we can't film with masks on. We're trying to get facial expressions, emotions, all that stuff. Even things like food-based studies where there is open eating studies will be affected by COVID precautions. So just keep that in mind. And one other thing I wanted to put in your mind is that manuscript and publication fees we usually tend to include in the grant, but for a small grant like this, that would be a whole chunk of the grant. So rather than putting it in the grant, it'd be better to like consult with the library or the college or university for financial assistance. Like there's one running right now. And if there is an IP or an invention or a copyright, even a license, please keep in mind that this is the perfect time to apply for invention disclosure with the Office of Tech Transfer. Patents are a great way to safeguard your assets and your ideas, even copyrights and licenses. So instead of waiting for big grants and then applying it after the disclosure has been made in like posters or papers, it's better to start it at this point. So it's a great way to like validate and also get Drexel behind your idea. If a project is worth their time, they would put lawyers and patent attorneys to look to protect your discoveries. And final thing, I just realized that even if there's $100, $200, make sure you spend on your account. Don't leave the account hanging in after the 1 year. So that's one thing. The 2018 project, even though we finished it a long time, data collection went wonderfully well. Time catches up, and we are only finally we submitted our first journal publication last week. So just to keep that in perspective, it's always helpful to get your data analysis done and start working on your manuscript as soon as possible. This is just a few updates from our current project. We are working on creating a game development with third party. Like I mentioned, this game is going to be deployed in older adults with mild cognitive impairment on site in a gym outside. So we had to find a coordinator in the gym to help us with that. So those are things that can delay things. But we are on time. We created everything. The other project is a VR-based filming project. Again, we can't do filming on campus, so we had to film offsite at somebody's house and only hire family members so that they can be unmasked and together. So that's some of the films that we captured. The class is going to go on in March. Like I said, since it's tied to a classroom deliverable, everything works on time. So it could be helpful to like tie it with certain classrooms or certain events. So that's pretty much all I got. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. You are probably like the person with the most association with R3s, right after Jess. Yes. So our next speaker is Jess. Yes, please.
All right. Well, I apologize. I don't have a PowerPoint. I was
Okay.
I was thinking this is going to be more conversational, so please hop in. I thought I could just tell you a little bit. I think Arun really captured some of the big lessons learned. So I can tell you just a little bit about my projects over the 2 years that I have been funded and some other lessons, and then kind of go from there. So briefly, my research explores women and children impacted by substance use. And so I was able to use, I got funded, I think in 2020 and 2021 for 2 R3s. And I have been able to use them as pilot data for my NIH grants, which has been really fantastic. So the area of focus for my grants is looking at medication for opioid use disorder among women. And so we know, medication for opioid use disorder works wonderfully. The barriers that we see, though, is getting women engaged in the treatment and then getting women to stay on the treatment. And so we see that this is a huge barrier to recovery. And so the first, I'm also trained as a family therapist. And so for me, everything goes back to the family system. And so the first R3 that I submitted was to just see if women enrolled in treatment with opioid use disorder would be interested in having family help support if they started medication-assisted treatment. And in what capacity would you want a family member, and which family member would you want? Like, is this even something we're interested in? And so I got some really great pilot data that has resulted in a couple manuscripts and presentations. And then the following year, I applied for it because once we determined that there was a large interest, majority of the women did want their family members involved in treatment specific to medication for opioid use disorder. I wanted to know. We're looking at certain mechanisms that might impact treatment engagement, specifically stigma and stigma from family. So that's the current study that we're running now to look at do stigma and family functioning predict recovery outcomes specific to medication for opioid use disorder among women. I was doing data collection earlier today. And so I think I go back to one of the lessons that I learned is, I think for me, it was lining out kind of my trajectory. So I have a few different lines of research that I follow. And this is the one that I knew that I would be applying for NIH funding for. And so I think what helped me is to piece it off a little bit and say, okay, this is where I need to start, which was the 2020 R3, building from what I learned from the 2020 R3 to the 2021 R3 application, and then ended up submitting it for an RO3, a NIDA RO3 application. So I think one thing that was helpful as a junior tenure track faculty was to have my trajectory ironed out and how this funding fit in each of those phases. I think the second thing is I would certainly echo Arun's suggestion of, and I think I said this last year too, is submit your IRB. So I had my IRB submitted before I even put my application in, because I knew I was going to run this study regardless. Where the funding would come from, I wasn't sure, but I just knew that this is the pilot data I needed to connect some of the dots to have really solid scientific backing for my RO3. And so I think that was the other thing that has been helpful in both applications is I had the IRB submitted prior to even the application going in. And then I think the last thing is I have been pretty fortunate in that all of my research, so my collaborators are Dr. David Bennett and Dr. Barbara Schindler from the medical school, and I collaborate with the Caring Together program, which is a gender-specific clinic through the medical school. And so I have I think having great collaborators in addition to our study design is mixed methods, and we can collect data in person or virtually. And so our data collection hasn't been stalled in any way due to the pandemic, which I think was was beneficial in writing multiple methods of collection. I think that's pretty much it. I don't know if there's any questions or thoughts or.
Yeah, let's pause for a second. Thank you, Jess. Thank you for sharing your perspective, your specific focus. Any questions for Arun or Jess at this time? Okay, so we will go next to Denise.
I want to thank Dr. Gitlin and the team, Dr. Kaimal and Arun and everybody on the committee for allowing us this opportunity to have this grant. So I'll tell you, our title is Examining the Effect of Standardized Simulation on Transcultural Self-Efficacy in Undergraduate Nursing Students. So I'm the primary investigator and I work in the undergraduate department. And I have Dr. Roseanne Regan, she's a co-investigator, and Dr. Linda Wilson is also a co-investigator. So one of the things we wanted to look at, because in Nursing 120, most of our undergraduate students, they take a course in cultural competence. And they have a course, here's the link, which they, again, they take in Nursing 120. And what they do is they learn about cultural competence and cultural awareness. And this is just a definition from the United States Department of Health and Human Services. Cultural and linguistic competency is defined as the capacity for individuals and organizations to work and communicate effectively in cross-cultural situations of Health and Human Services office. The work, let me just start this again. Cultural linguistic competency is defined as the capacity for all individuals and organizations to work and communicate effectively in cross-cultural situations. This is from the United States Department of Health and Human Services, also from the Office of Minority and Health. And one of the things we wanted to do for is pre-training in this project, that they already had this course. We want to see if they actually apply this in a clinical setting. So some of the things that we're going to be doing for pre-training is, again, just reiterating that you had this course already in 120. We're going to look at some videos that will demonstrate cultural competency, and then also an article that they may read. So the problem and the purpose and background. So we know we have a diverse university. We have people from different backgrounds and ethnicity. So it's real important. As you can see, cultural competence must be included in nursing education and clinical practice to sustain the future nursing students in healthcare. And one of the things we wanted to do is just to examine the effect of the standardized patient simulation experience on transcultural self-efficacy and undergraduate nursing. And you can see some of the reports from the Institute of Medication. They reported in 2001, course in the quality of KS. The new health system for the 21st century was the clarion call to develop cultural competence in healthcare, especially in nurses, as the largest group of healthcare workers. Also, the major purpose is to decrease health disparities and provide cultural competence care to all races and cultures. Going backwards, sorry about that. Let's move forward. So here's our method and participation. We're going to be using nursing students from our holistic gerontology course. It's going to be a quantitative quasi-experiment. We'll have a pre-test and post-test. And again, we just want to examine the effect of the standardized patient simulation. And the simulation, we have two simulations that the students are going to participate in. I'll talk about that in a little bit. We're going to collect some demographics. And then we're going to be doing two scenarios that we're going to be presenting in our simulation lab, which will look at how much care? What is the what kind the training from 120? Does it really transpire into our clinical practice? We teach about it in theory, but are they actually practicing? So that's one of our goals. So again, the 2 simulation experience, we have a simulation scenario where there's an African-American male who's presented in the ER, and because he has a drug addiction, he's asking for help. He's not there for that. But from the scenario, the nurses have a conversation saying that this patient is a recurrent. So they really ignore him. And what happens? The patient actually dies because nobody really paid attention to the patient. The other scenario that we will simulation we will be presented is an Asian couple who
Denise,
Japanese, I'm sorry, and wrote my 2 co-investigators, please interrupt me, or you can say a few things. It's an Asian couple where the husband has died. And so one of the things in Asian culture is that, okay, they want the body to remain there. And they want to have, their cultural practices and beliefs. So what do you do in that situation? Do you accommodate them? Do you tell them they have to leave? We know with the hospital setting, the turnover is just so fast. You get a bed, you're ready to fill the next bed. So what do you do in this situation for this Japanese couple? When they really want the body to stay there, and they have some practices and values where the body should stay there for a certain length of time. So those are our 2 simulation projects. The tool we'll be using is this transcultural self-efficacy tool, and they'll be doing the pre and the post test. Just talk a little bit about that. Okay, so in this tool, I just wanted to give you a little information on this tool. Marianne Jeffries, and this has been her research for years and years. We'll be using this transcultural self-efficacy tool. And this is a toolkit which she provided in her book. It's the 3rd edition. And this tool is used in conjunction with teaching cultural competence in nursing and healthcare setting. The toolkit contains a wealth of hands-on, user-friendly resources that help nurses and other educators to understand the importance of educating students about cultural competence. And this will tell you a little bit about Mary Ann Jeffries. Again, she's done a lot of research. She's won numerous awards in transcultural care. Let me just say she's real well known for her transcultural cares, and we'll be using, her tool, as I said before. We're still on waiting for IRB approval. And some tips which we learned, what I've learned from this experiment is, let me just go to the tips real quick and I'm done. Okay. All right, just some tips. Choose a topic of interest. Make sure you're passionate about it. I have a well-experienced 2 co-investigators. Dr. Regan have written books. If she's done quite a bit of study. Dr. Wilson, I'm sure most people have known. Oh my goodness, a wealth of information, both of them. Start small, be patient, think positive, just do it. The end. Any questions?
And Denise, you were actually an example of someone who didn't use the full $5,000 budget. So I did want to emphasize that it is up to $5,000. So do not feel like you have to come up with a project that is a $5,000 project. It could be significantly less and aligned with the scope of your
Okay.
topic and your interest. So thank you, Denise. So happy to hear about all the progress.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is our own Carrie Catone.
Okay. Well, I feel very green when when I'm in here. It's like listening to everyone. I'm like, oh, I don't know how many tips I can give everyone here, but I'll just tell you about my experience so far. It was a huge learning curve. I'm a PhD candidate, so I really don't have much experience with grants. So this was my first grant I've ever received. So I had no experience in a budget and justification form, putting a bio sketch together. The whole application process was so new to me. But I was really thankful. I did receive feedback before I was approved, and I was questioned on a few things, and I really value that feedback that I received. Like I was asked, like, how will member checking be conducted? And so after I received my feedback, I was approved, but I'm still learning because once you get the funding, it's like, you still like, what do I do now? So it's a very much like, it's definitely a learning process. So as I said, I am a PhD candidate for the Creative Arts Therapies program, and I'm studying, I'm researching the clinical practices of medical art therapists working with children and adolescents diagnosed with sickle cell disease. And the reason why I'm doing this is because there's literally one published study out there that is on the effectiveness of art therapy with sickle cell patients. However, I worked in the medical setting for 8 years, and there's a lot of art therapists that work in this setting. So my question is, what are they doing if there's no research? So, and I also want to know what the experiences of the patients are. So the goals, my aims are to explore and describe the clinical goals and the interventions, and characterize the key challenges and barriers that the medical art therapists are facing, to enhance and understand what the patients are experiencing with sickle cell, and also with their experience with medical arts therapy. And hopefully this will lead to develop some preliminary education and training recommendations for medical art therapists. So I'm doing a qualitative research design, and I'll just go to the next one. I'm interviewing, the goal was to interview 20 medical art therapists from the United States who have worked with children or adolescents with sickle cell, and also interview 6 pediatric patients with sickle cell and who have participated in art therapy, and then to explore current literature to better understand their physical and psychosocial stressors, and also explore racial disparities in healthcare, disease discrimination, and medical stigmatization. So my progress to date, that's really small, but I've interviewed 21 art therapists, and I used the funding for transcription services. And so they are all transcribed, which is awesome. And I'm currently analyzing that data. And then I've recruited 2 adolescents. One interview is completed, the other one's this Friday. So hopefully we'll get a few more. And I've also hired a research assistant who's helping me conduct the adolescent interviews. She identifies as Black, and she's going to be helping me with these interviews. And it was definitely encouraged to find someone who identified as a person of color to help me with these interviews by my dissertation committee. So luckily I reached out to a fellow art therapist, and she has agreed to help me with this. And also, let's see. And I think that's it so far. So I'm going to stop sharing. I really don't have like too much to say, but that's like my progress so far. And hopefully we get more adolescents, but that has been a really huge challenge to anyone that is about to do the research, is to recruit children or adolescents. Any questions?
It's really interesting. I have had two cousins that had sickle cell. So it's really interesting that you're doing a study on the younger person. But an interesting question I have, and this not only your research, is there life expectancy for sickle cell patients? Have that increased?
It has. I mean, it has increased. I mean, luckily there's a bone marrow transplant, but that's not offered to all patients, and not everyone's eligible for that. But there's 2 newer treatments that have like extended the life of sickle cell and has led to like less pain crises. But still, I mean, everyone has different sickle cells, so there is still a lower lifeline, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Carrie. You emphasized something, Carrie, that is, I hope, a strength of this grant mechanism, which is that you will get really comprehensive feedback, that sometimes people have taken that feedback and resubmitted and been funded the second time. So in your case and a few others, we asked for additional information based on the reviewers, and then we made a decision based on your response to the feedback. I see another recipient, Dahlia, you're here as well. Dahlia was one of the other recipients for the PhD Student Award. I think we gave out 7. So at this time, I'd like to thank all the panelists. I'm happy to open it up for questions. I have a few questions for you, but I wanted to see if anyone else has any questions at this time. Any of you thinking of applying? That's why you're here.
I might apply for the next cycle. I haven't.
Stop. I think you need to stop applying. You've had like 4 already.
No, but I haven't done anything personally.
That
I've
is
always
true. Yes, you have
participated in
not
other
been
people's
PI.
research.
So yes, I take that back. Definitely apply as PI.
Yeah, I have some ideas that can be a device-based project, so we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Jen? Yeah? Yep, yeah, go ahead, Jen.
Oh, I was going to say, I have one too. And I've this time, and I've gotten one or 2 in the past, and I've always found them very useful for collecting pilot data.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been really challenging with COVID. Arun and I exchange emails, and I've had to, when I wrote this last one, I wrote it as if we wouldn't be able to do eating studies in the lab. Mm-hmm. So, and we used the summer to design a protocol where we wouldn't have to use eating, we could use food pictures. So we're just getting now to actually gearing up to do that. So but it's been very useful to have the money, because you can pay student help. And you need a lot of help when you're going to do, as you know, when you're doing human participant studies.
Thanks, Jen. And yeah, you were one of the recipients in the last cycle as well. I'm glad you were able to pivot. And this is an ongoing challenge with funding. So in many ways, I think the scope of these projects really invite smaller scale, doable studies as much as possible. Again, remember, you don't have to do active data collection. You can work with existing data. You just have to present a strong case for how you will analyze it and what you'll do with it.
Can I jump and add another point? Mm-hmm. Since you mentioned it doesn't have to be an active data collection, can be used secondary data. One thing I found very helpful, since I'm also a support staff for research projects, is the online databases that we have recently signed up with, especially Research Match and All of Us Research. So this would be an easy project for Research Match to get a nationwide audience, get a lot of feedback. And I mean, I can say Michael Bruneau, who has done a wonderful work with Research Match, with almost like reached out to more than like 3,000 or 4,000 participants in the nation and gotten feedback from a lot of them. And the All of Us research platform that we have signed up is specifically geared to get an ethnically diverse population, because research matches 72% white males, white, and or 60% of that is males. So to get an ethnically diverse population to make validity for the research results, All of Us portal has made sure that they collect from almost 1 million people medical information, and it's now available for all of Drexel personnel to use and tap into that information. So it doesn't require any in-person presence. Just sign up to All of Us and it'll be a wonderful tool to be. Say a shameless self-promotion, by the way, because I'm the liaison for that, for both of these portals.
You don't own it. It's not like,
Oh, it's not owning, yeah.
oh, you're just sharing information. So that's
Yes,
great.
yes.
Yeah, we look forward to checking it out. Yeah, Jacelyn.
Can I ask a question about the research, or should it be geared towards the grant?
You can ask absolutely about the research match.
Okay, so Carrie, I have a question for you. Hi, it's good to see you. I love that this is really giving you the foundational platform for the knowledge, because there are no existing data around this. And I'm already thinking ahead and wondering what the next step would be. Like when you get this information, what's the next project that you want to use this information to inform?
Yeah, that's a good question. I not only do I want to do those guidelines, but the next step would be to do to measure interventions, so measure the effectiveness of art therapy. It's like that you can't go there until we figure out what we're doing here now. So that's the long run.
Would there be like some type of manualization or protocol development prior to that, or?
I think anything that has to do with the guidelines, the protocols, that's a really large, that takes on, that's a lot of pieces, you know, medical doctors, there needs to be a lot of people going on through that. So I think I can get the ball rolling by doing the, you know, suggestions and the recommendations. Would I like to be a part of that big, you know, that big plan? Yes. But I definitely think that we can start by, you know, by measuring interventions and what makes the difference, whether art therapy does help this population. I mean, so who knows? Hopefully.
Anything you want to offer the recipients, how you planned your time and how you sort of planned all the pieces of the application, so that people have a sense of how to organize your submission?
Again, just thinking, and this is the first time, you know, actually me writing a grant and learning about it. And just formulating this, thinking what to do and how to do it. So I think, again, it's real important. And again, this thanking the co-investigators, Dr. Regan and Dr. Wilson, for their insight and how to organize it and just responding to each aspect of the grant. You know, what's your purpose? Why do you want, what do you hope to accomplish? And just following those guidelines and being clear with the purpose of the, which your theory, what you want to research. And then just the time, meeting together with via Zoom and communicating back and forth, and just scheduling our times, especially if you're teaching full time. But the good part is we have Zoom. We can actually, you know, correspond back and meet via Zoom, just going over things, making sure that things is correct, just organizing. And then if you're going to do some simulation, meeting with Simulation Lab, the directors there. Again, this I think this really sitting down, knowing your co-investigators, and collaborate with them continuously and keeping in touch with it's a whole team behind the scenes, not just our co-investigators and investigators. You got a team of people that's also you're communicating, making sure that things flow. The IRB, I was looking at all the information for the IRB. I'm like, how many days is this going to take me? But, just again, just trying to understand that how important it is if you're going to be using human subjects, if you're not. So just understanding the process and being organized, and then being able to communicate with the co-investigator and the other people that's behind the scene, that your colleagues that's working with you.
I have a question. For anyone who's received a grant, when I was really like, where do I go? What do I do? There was very much like, okay, you received it, but then what? And I just don't know if anyone else experienced that. I feel like I emailed the wrong person about the funding. I'm like, oh my gosh. So is there just like, I don't know if there's like an easy tips or tips or tricks on and I know they say go to the website, but I mean, yeah, I go to the website and it's like, okay, I understand, but I don't. Like, put your stuff in the cart.
Yeah.
know
I
what I mean?
know what you're talking about
Yeah.
the cards. Yeah. We had. So this is where for doctoral students, you should be working very closely with your advisor, and those are the best people to, because your advisor's been through. Yes, if you're not familiar with the expense process, yeah, it's a production, and we're actually changing it. Instead of giving each of you a cost center number, we'll just have the finance team track your expenses, so it's not going to be as much of a burden on you. They'll just make sure that you're within the limits, and they'll just help you through it. So that was a lesson learned for us. And you can absolutely reach out to us. So, yes, you've received it. Some individuals are familiar, and they are familiar, especially if you're tenure track, you're submitting grant all the time. But if you're not, it's kind of, a whole new experience. So do not hesitate to reach out to us. We are happy to support you after as well. So we are here. Yeah.
Thank you. I just like to normalize that experience.
Thank you
for
for
yeah.
I am so glad you brought it up. So many great points, Carrie, you're just like insights galore. Okay, anything else? Arun?
I got a question. I don't know if other people are going through this stuff. So especially if you have to buy stuff that's not on Smart Source, or you have to pay for services outside the Smart Source world, just the grant number is not enough, or the cost center number is not enough. You probably need what's called a Pcard. And I don't know if $5,000 is necessarily a place for applying for a Pcard and go through that whole rigmarole. So I don't know if past recipients, I have a Pcard, I use it for all my other stuff. I don't know if it is beneficial for past recipients or future recipients to use a dedicated departmental or some kind of Pcard, or would you recommend just getting Pcard for this grant? I don't know.
Oh, no. So this is, I think we have enough Pcards in the college. You should go to your department, or you should go to your PI. Doctoral students, you should go to your PI. Individual recipients, you go to your department, and if all else fails, the finance team has a Pcard they can use. But it's small enough, it's not worth but really your department Pcard should work. And again, any issues with any of that, you let us know. There's some things we have to order through Smart Source, like Amazon, for example, is a vendor. So anything you order from Amazon has to go there. Office supplies. It's only things that are not available through Smart Source that you can use Pcards with. So for example, participant compensation, I thought I could just go get gift cards from the pharmacy or the grocery store, but actually you can't. You have to go to NGC, National Gift Card Center. So there's Unfortunately, there's a lot of paperwork, but again, any questions you can reach out to us post award as well.
Hi, everyone. I have a question. So assuming that you were funded for you received the PhD student award last cycle, can you apply for extra funds or reapply?
No, and firstly, congrats, Cynthia. You were one of the recipients, yes?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, Cynthia was also, how do you say your last name?
Klobodu.
Klobodu. So Cynthia Klobodu was also a PhD dissertation award. Were you pre or post? Like
So it's a dissertation award. So
dissertation award. So we would not repeat it within the year. So you would have to wait for the next cycle.
right. So could you apply for, just to add on, like apply for more funds, or you would have to use another study?
Yeah, so we're trying to make sure that in any given year, we don't have two people receiving it. So, I mean, the same person receiving it in two cycles. So I would encourage you to wait if you want to apply again as a doctoral student for next year's cycle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. If there's no other questions, we can all capture 5 minutes back of our life. And again, reach out to us, reach out to Vicky. She's our point of contact for both of these. And we look forward to your applications. Happy to meet you all. Thank you to all our panelists. Thank you to Darren. You have kept Tuesday topics alive and thriving over the years. Anything else to add, Darren?
No, thank you all for your insights and hearing about your projects. They're very exciting. And we look forward to seeing you at the next Tuesday topic.